tonight. It's Monday night, and we've had a big weekend of college football and high school football in the state of Georgia. Playoffs are winding down as we're moving into the championship levels, and so we're going to cover some Georgia high school football, and then we're going to talk this past weekend college football a little bit. Sweet, you want to start us out with the 6A in Georgia,
I'd love to.
where
We're,
they're
we're
at?
going to talk. We're going to talk about Carrollton versus Buford, the two best teams in the state of Georgia, and possibly two best teams in the country. Buford is undefeated. Both teams are undefeated, as a matter of fact. Coming into this game, Carrollton averages 47.5 points a game on offense, and Buford gives up 10 points a game on defense. So this is definitely going to be a battle of two stout offenses against two stout defenses. Looking forward to that game. Buford's led by Dayton Rayola, whose older brother Dylan is the quarterback at the University of Nebraska and maybe in the portal here shortly, if you believe the pundits. But yeah, Dayton was also committed to Nebraska, and he backed off his commitment not too long ago when his uncle got fired. So I'm not sure that any of the Riolas will be at Nebraska moving forward. Anyhow, he will be at the Mercedes-Benz on Monday to face Carrollton, and they're looking forward to winning their first championship in the state's highest classification. They've won 13 state championships this century, so about one every other year is what that averages to. But none of them have been in Georgia's highest classification. Buford started out at 2A and has came all the way up to 6A now. So they've had quite a climb, and with their facilities and everything, it's no wonder that they have, and they're gonna be a force to be reckoned with as long as that school stays open. Carrollton, led by Joey King, is also has they haven't won a state championship since 1998, and they've never won one at the state's highest classification. So that's something they're looking forward to as well. Whoever wins on Monday will be a first-time winner at the highest level. Carrollton has a lot of talented players. Peyton Zachary is a UNLV bound receiver who had a buck 72 and touchdown in their semifinal game. Cameron Wood, who's committed to Liberty at running back, had 33 rushing touchdowns on the season. They've got a ton of top 400 prospects: Dorian Barney, Zealous Hicks, Shamar Ono, who are all going to big time P4 programs. So, and then Buford. Buford is probably as talented as anybody in the state with all the different kids they have. At the end of the day, I think this is going to be as good a championship game as we've had in a while. I think it's going to be a close game. I see it as I think the coaches. I think this is going to be a game decided by the coaches and who's able to get their kids to impose their will on the other. Defensively, I think it's going to be huge for Buford to come out and punch Carrollton in the mouth and get a few stops early. If they don't, it's going to be Katie bar the door. At the end of the day, I like Buford to win their first title at the highest level. I'm going to go ahead and take Buford 31, Carrollton 27. But it's going to be a heck of a game, and I'm looking forward to it. Kev, what are your thoughts on that game?
I think again, we were talking about it just a minute ago. Buford's ranked 4, Carrollton's ranked 5 in national polls. Both two really good teams. One of the things interesting to me is in the past few years, Grant, this is the third time in the last 4 years that Carrollton's played in the state championship. They've been led by their offense, and this year they're really good on defense, giving up 12 points a game. And on the other side of the field, you have Buford, who year in and year out dominates defensively. Always one of the best defenses in the state. Let's just call it best defenses in the country. And they always have a lot of speed and physical on defense. Well, this year, after about the 4th week of the season, their offense really kicked in. You mentioned Rayola, and they've been 30 plus points every game. So it's both these teams have they're good on both sides of the ball. They're always good on both sides of the ball, but they're really, really good on both sides of the ball. So to me, that's what makes this game very interesting. It's not even just a matchup game. Both these teams are good on both sides of the ball. They're both well coached. They both are going to make fundamentally, sound plays. I think it's going to come down to the fourth quarter, and it'll be a field position, special teams, turnover type thing that turns this thing, key penalty. I think it'll be very similar to that. Last year, Carrollton and Grayson played, and it was a tie game at half, and um, going into the fourth quarter, it was a one-score game, and Grayson defensively just pulled away. I think it'll be similar to that, but I honestly think it'll be closer to that. I could see this game being decided in the last, 5 to 7 minutes. I'm going to go with Carrollton to win it in a close game, but man, it's a toss-up. It truly is.
Yeah.
So from there we go to the 5A, which both the 5A is in the semifinals this week. They play Thursday. They had a week court case scenario to decide if Gainesville's players could play due to the large fight that they had in the quarterfinal round. Anyhow, they got most of their players eligible and was able to get out a big win over Langston Hughes, who, in my opinion, was the best team in 5A. But hey, when you go to the playoffs every week, you got to bring it in the state of Georgia. So we got Thomas County and Roswell playing in one semifinal this Thursday, and you have Gainesville and Rome playing in the other semifinal. Let's start Thomas County, Roswell. Thomas County's 13-0, Roswell's 12-1. I look at this game as a matchup of just two teams that execute very well. And, both of them have beat 6A schools this year, and it's because of their execution. And they're both really talented teams. I think this game is going to be a game that's in the 20s. I think, again, it'll be very competitive. I think Thomas County will win this game 27-24. But again, I think it's going to be competitive. Sweet, what's your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm bullish on Thomas County. They've been great all year, and I've said on many occasions that they could be as good as anybody in the state, in the country for that matter. They've got a lot of talent down there. Because they're not in the highest classification, you don't hear about them as much, and they're down there on the border, so you don't hear about them in the metro area that much as well for that reason too. But I really like these guys. Coach Rogers got these kids playing ball. I really like Jabari Watkins, his 4-star commit who's headed to Nebraska. I think that they're gonna win the game. I like them. I like them 38. Let's go 38-27. 38-27. Where does that take you next, Kev?
And then the next game is Gainesville versus Rome. Both these teams are 11-2. Both of them have losses to 6A schools. Both of them, again, to me, this one is the matchup that you're going to see more speed on the field in this game and just the overall talent level in the other one. Doesn't mean that these teams are better. Let me say that. Gainesville has a lot of talent. They've got the defensive end that's going to Bama, the quarterback that's going to Clemson, and they really stepped up. Hughley, the quarterback, really stepped up in that game last week. It was Langston Hughes was ahead early, and then right into the halftime in the second half, he came out and really played well and just took over that game and led Gainesville to the win. And so now Gainesville, they do have a loss to, I believe it's Roswell earlier this year. And
you're right.
So that's, if you're looking at potential rematches, and I just mentioned that game because to me, Gainesville's an anomaly. Again, you mentioned Joey King. Gainesville's coach is Josh Niblett, who won multiple state championships at Hoover in Alabama. And then, like some coaches do, when you get to that where you can collect retirement in one state, you take a job at another state and work years, and then you're going to get retirement in that state. And that's what he's done. But he's won in both states in that. So you wonder if he's going to break through and win one. And I look at his team, and I think that on the high end, he has the highest ceiling with the talent that he has. So we'll see how it's going to play out in these last 2 weeks. But I would give Gainesville the advantage in this Rome game. I think they will probably win, and I do think Gainesville's offense will put a lot of points on the board. I think they'll probably win this game 38-24. But again, I'm only mentioning that Roswell game to see, I thought Gainesville, after they lost to Carrollton, would win out the rest of the year, and they didn't. They got a loss, and then before they got in the state playoffs. So, they have a clunker every now and then, I guess is the point that I'm saying.
Yep.
They're a good team, but every once in a while you'll watch them and you'll be like, this is not the same team that I've watched. But I think they'll win this one and set up a really good state championship next week with Thomas County. What's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think Gainesville has a little more talent than Rome does. I do like Rome. Listen, Coach John Reed's a hell of a coach. He won back-to-back titles in 2016 and 17 at Rome. That 2017 Rome team was probably the best team in the state of Georgia that year, even though they were, I want to say, maybe at 5A and the classification was 7A was the highest at the time. But that team was a bunch of, that team would come out and hit you in the mat. Great ball team. So Rome isn't a bunch of chumps up there. Rome's going to give Gainesville all they want. But at the end of the day, I think that that Niblett, and I'm just going to call it, he's recruited well to Gainesville. He's got a lot of kids to move up there and play in that program, and they're they're doing well. They're 11-2, so they've lost a couple games, but I think they're the better team here. I think that they beat Rome. I'm going to take Gainesville 37, Rome, or 34, Rome 24. Give me Gainesville 34, Rome 24.
If we end up with a Gainesville Thomas County championship on Monday, and then of course we've already talked about Carrollton and Grayson on Tuesday, that would be 2 back-to-back nights of great football. We were talking about just one poll a minute ago, Carrollton and Carrollton and Buford. I might have said Grayson a minute ago. Carrollton and Buford playing this championship, one being 4 and 5. Just got the Max Prep poll here and looking at it. Carrollton's actually ranked 1 in it, and Buford's ranked 6 with Grayson 13. That's kind of what had me thinking of Grayson. So, again, Georgia footballs, you can line it up and match it with any state. And I know you've talked about it a lot, but a lot of good teams.
Yeah, I would love to, in some of these postseason high school bowl games that they put together, the Herb Street series and the the Geico series and those different things. There's a real opportunity there to match up Georgia's best against your better teams from Texas. Maybe one of the California privates or a Florida private. The one thing about Florida and California for the most part is most of your talent is in privates there, where as Texas and Georgia, the public schools are able to keep a lot of their talent. Not to say that they don't get recruited a ton, because they do in the public schools as well. But talent-wise, Georgia publics are second to none in the country. So I'm looking forward to seeing who's able to hold serve here in the championships, and then who they're going to match up against ultimately in the bowl series and see what's what. I remember when Marietta. We faced, I can't remember the team, but they were from the state of Washington, and they had the 2 Ohio State kids. They had Egbuka, the wide receiver, and then the defensive tackle for Ohio State, both of them national champions last year. And Marietta beat that team by like 70. It was we were ahead 28-0 4 minutes into the game. It was insane. So Georgia usually shows up in those games, and they're a lot of fun. It's good to see the kids represent themselves against the best in the country. So hopefully we'll get a little more of that. That'll take us into talking about the playoffs, the omissions. Who we think should be in, shouldn't be in, who got snubbed, who got in that really shouldn't be in. I'll go ahead and start. I honestly, listen, I'm all for everybody, having a seat at the table when it's deserved. However, I don't think that you can look at neither Tulane nor James Madison say that either of those teams are in the top 12 in the country. They're just not. And to omit a Vanderbilt team, because let's face it, I've said this for weeks. Any other 2-loss SEC team in the conference would have been in that playoff, except Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt got screwed in my eyes. Secondly, you look at a Notre Dame who's sitting there with 2 losses. Now, Notre Dame is a little different to me because they didn't have, their 2 biggest games were both losses. Okay, so they lost to a really good Texas A&M team, and their other loss was to a solid Miami team. Um, you know, but I'm more of a big win guy than a good loss guy, and that's why for me Notre Dame, I wasn't as angry that they weren't in it as a lot of other people do. I think they were one of the top 12 teams in the country. Yes, I do. I think they're better than both Tulane and James Madison. But I understand at the end of the day why they were omitted. There were a few teams that had a case. BYU had 2 losses to the same team. That team, a team who's top 4 and has a bye the first weekend. So they had an argument. Texas sitting there with 3 losses and a few good wins. They feel like they had an argument. So there are plenty of teams that had arguments here. But in my eyes, like I said, if they're good enough and they're able to prove that, then I like it. But you look at a team like James Madison who played. I want to say they played one P14 this year, and they lost that game by 14 points. So, yeah, and they weren't. It wasn't a ranked team either. So, I mean, what are we doing here? I don't get it. What are your thoughts, Kev?
Yeah, on that part, I totally agree. They actually played 2 teams, Louisville and Washington State. Louisville beat them by 14, and they beat Washington State by 4. And I don't know if at this point we can. Well, Washington State's not a Power 4 team. They're not in that Pac-12
Yeah.
anymore. That one Louisville game was the only one they played. So yeah, I mean, the NCAA is the only organization that could screw this up when we're talking about the playoffs. I mean, how in the world do you design a system where 2 Power 4 teams get it, or 2 non-Power 4 teams get in? It's just crazy. I mean, especially when you say, well, first of all, to me it's hard to warrant even one getting in, but somehow you do that, and then it's like they let Miami into this thing because Duke upsets Virginia. So, behind closed doors, it's like, well, we got to have all the Power 4 conferences represented. So you jump Miami over Notre Dame and you get an ACC team in the championship, which the whole ACC tiebreaker system to let a 4-loss team play in that championship is the craziest thing in the world. That's a whole nother conversation. But to me, just real quickly, here's how I would have ranked them going into the thing. I think Indiana was 1, Georgia's 2. Why Georgia, the way that they're playing, didn't move above Ohio State's beyond me. I mean, when you look at Ohio State's total schedule, Georgia's playing a much better schedule, and Georgia's playing as good as anybody right now. So I would go Indiana 1, Georgia 2, Ohio State 3, Texas Tech 4, Oregon 5, and a very close 5-6 to me. A&M would have been 6 because of that Notre Dame win on the road. I think that's a huge quality win. And, just if you want to look at a road win, they not because they won the game, but how they won the game. They were very decisive in their win against LSU on the road. So I think A&M should either be, after your conference champions, them and Oregon are your 2 next best teams. Then I would go Ole Miss 7, Oklahoma 8. Very fortunate team in Oklahoma that they've won 3 or 4 games. All your toss-up games, they have won, even though they've gained less yards than the other team in those games. They've won. But they deserve it. They've only got 2 losses, so I would throw them 8. To me, and we'll come back and talk about this, I would have Notre Dame 9. And then to me, the last spot before you get into the 2 teams that we both agree don't deserve it, I think it comes down to Miami and Alabama. And I would say not just because of the loss, but how you lost, how you played the last 3 or 4 games of the season, to me has to matter. And Miami went through a slump midseason, but they finished very strong. Alabama, to me, limped home. They lost at home to Oklahoma in a game that they should have won, but they had turnovers. If you look at Simpson, the first 8 games versus the last 4, totally different quarterback. Something has gotten to his confidence level, and they lost that game, and then really that game Saturday against Georgia, they were really fortunate to score. Had 209 yards of offense. So I take those 2 offensive performances that they had against Oklahoma and Georgia, and I would have put Miami above them. I know we don't want to hurt a team playing in their conference championship, but I just think you got to look at the way they played the last month of the season, and I think that knocks them out of it, in my opinion. But anyhow, that's not how they did it. And then I agree with you. The last 2 teams, if I was just picking, I would have had Vanderbilt 11, Texas 12. Even though Texas did beat Vanderbilt, I just look at the consistency of the season. Texas was up and down a lot, and Vanderbilt only lost that game by 3 points in Austin. And again, if I'm, the whole Miami Notre Dame thing, and what a fiasco the committee did by ranking Notre Dame ahead of Miami, and then the last week of the season, saying all those other rankings that we had didn't matter. We're going to throw Miami back ahead.
Yeah, that. I mean, all this could have been avoided if they would have done what they should have done from the beginning and kept Miami above them. But it goes. I mean, Notre Dame always gets this benefit of the doubt. This is the first time in the history of that school for football that they haven't got the benefit of the doubt on something. And do I think they're playing better than Miami right now? They might be. It's tough to tell because, like I said, they're not playing. Actually, neither of those teams are playing a lot of quality opponents. So, when your 2 best performances of the year are losses to better teams, then to me that kind of is a hollow argument. I do agree with you though. At the end of the day, looking at the teams, I do think that Vanderbilt definitely should have been in my opinion, and I would have been happy with a Notre Dame or a BYU, or even a Texas over James Madison and Tulane, and I really hope that both of those teams show up and put up a good fight. But if they get beat by 3-4 touchdowns, or worse than that, then you're going to have all hell's going to break loose, and you're going to hear about it. It didn't matter last year, though. I mean, you remember, Tennessee got their teeth kicked in by Ohio State. Indiana got bombed, and it happens. You don't have to be a group of 5 team to get blown out in a playoff game. You can be a P4 team and do that. But I think that the overall strength of schedule and that has to mean a little bit more. And, James Madison, while I wish him the best of luck and everything, it's a great story. Let's face it, they don't belong. Tulane, had a little bit better argument than James Madison, but not much. What do you think of those 2?
Yeah, Tulane at least beat Duke.
Yeah,
so they have a win over a so-called conference champion now. And again, Duke has some good wins, so they have a win over them. So, and they've played competitive in other games, even though Ole Miss did take it to them. They've played competitive, so they might have an argument. To me, James Madison has no argument, and I feel like they got in simply because the committee started talking about him and the media started talking to him about a month ago. I think the biggest fault of this committee, which everybody's talking about it, is simply the fact that they were influenced by the media. Number 1, putting James Madison in. Number 2, jumping Notre Dame and Miami back and forth. It's obvious that they listened to the media and then went into the rooms and talked about it. It was never a situation where they were, wholeheartedly set in their decisions. So what a fiasco! Some people are actually, screaming to eliminate the show weekly and just, do it at the end so that you can. But, there's so many flaws in it. And you say we'll go to 16 teams, and I really do think 16 teams will help the solution. But one of our friends had mentioned the non-power fours. Just give them their own tournament.
Yeah.
Like the FCC teams the FCS teams, has. And I think that's the solution. Give Tulane, give James Madison, give them their own 8-team tournament.
4 teams,
and
whatever.
let them,
I agree.
yeah, let them sort it out, and they can be proud of their season. But look, they're not going to win this. And they might have a year that one of the teams is really good and they might get to the semifinals or something. But that's all. But for the years that they're keeping teams out that deserve to be in this, and like you mentioned, Vanderbilt, their fans, their players, they deserve to be in this. And we're going to watch two teams that on a home game. Well, yeah, both of them. Both these teams on their best attendance home game are going to draw 30,000.
Yeah.
And you're keeping teams that can draw 60, 80,000 fans if it's a home game for them. Granted, these are going to be road games, but those fans are going to travel. It just makes no sense. The excitement, those games, the ratings in those games is going to be terrible. We'll watch it because we're diehard fans, but most fans are not going to watch Oregon and James Madison or Ole Miss and Tulane for the second time. Let's on these playoff scenarios. Let's talk two things. Let's talk Indiana first because they are number one, and then let's talk that Miami Notre Dame debate. But let's talk Indiana first. Indiana, is a team, and they got beat in the playoffs last year, and everybody, was like, okay, they weren't real once they got in a game, because they lost to Ohio State in the regular season, and then they played Notre Dame and lost. But in reality, they were a good team last year. They just played better teams and lost there towards the end of the season. Two really good teams, in fact. Teams that played at the end of the day, both those teams played for the national championship. And then, people kind of doubted them as they came into this year, and they took that doubt right away. That Illinois game in the season, early in the season, I predicted that game totally on the wrong end. Indiana just beat the doors off of them. I think the one thing that people don't understand about this Indiana team that is just absolute reality, there's not a better coach team on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball than Indiana. They have good players and good talent on their team, but their front line on offense or front four on defense, front five in essence on offense, they may not have the most NFL players in those groups, but I'm telling you, there's nobody coached better that executes better on the line of scrimmage in Indiana. They're very physical. To me, they're very deserving, and I think they have a shot at winning this thing. What's your thoughts?
I do too. Listen, I've been big on Indiana for most of the season. After that Oregon win, going like I've said, going east to west and playing like that is really hard. And the fact that these kids went into Oregon, and Oregon isn't an island. It's not Death Valley, but it's still a tough place to play. And Oregon's got some athletes. Oregon's one of the top 5 talented teams in the country, bar none. They have a lot more talent on that team, star ratings than Indiana does. But Indiana went out there and smacked them around. They took the fight to them. And the other night, I'm all in on Indiana now. The other night, they just out physicaled Ohio State. They punched them in the mouth. They were the tougher team, and they deserved to win that game. I predicted Ohio State to win by 10 plus, because I thought that they were just going to out talent them. I still think Ohio State is more talented than Indiana, but Indiana proved the other night that on that any given Saturday, they were the best team in the country, then. So what happens now? First of all, I'm like you. You said something earlier. Georgia should be the number 2 team in the country, not Ohio State. I realize, why they did that. They could have flipped them and put Georgia at 2, Ohio State at 3, to avoid the Indiana Ohio State semifinal matchup. I get that, and I'm I don't have the rankings in front of me or the bowl layout in front of me to tell you, if they're trying to keep SEC versus SEC or, Big Ten versus Big Ten, if that's what they were trying to avoid. But in any case, I look at it like a couple years ago when Georgia was on a 29 game heater, 2-time defending national champions, undefeated. They lose their conference championship game by a field goal, and they drop 5 spots. So I was expecting Ohio State to have a similar type drop and drop at least to 5. I thought that would drop them out of perhaps getting a bye, but they dropped a spot basically. So nothing happened. So the inconsistencies of the committees and how they rank and seed these teams is ridiculous. And there's I don't know what type of transparency you could have, but there's got to be a better way at the end of the day, because they've got more egg on their face after another. The NCAA never misses an opportunity to botch something. That's one thing that they are good at, and they did that again. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and you mentioned the matchups. So here's what the matchups kind of show. To me, it's and others have said this. They set this thing up to create as many Big Ten SEC matchups as they could, and that's obviously for television ratings. So the first potential one, Indiana gets a bye, and their second game will be, or excuse me, their first game, which will be the winner of their opponent, second game will be either Oklahoma or Alabama. So you got Big Ten SEC right there. You leave Ohio State 2, you got Texas A&M ranked 7th. So if A&M beats Miami with a 10th seed, A&M hosts Miami. There again, you have Ohio State, Texas A&M, Big Ten, SEC. And then the potential there, so you have 3 and 6, Georgia 3, they get a bye. Ole Miss beats Tulane, so you have the 3-6 matchup. One of those schools, likely an SEC, matchup in the quarters with Georgia and Ole Miss. Let's say Ohio State, holds seed and they beat A&M. There again, you have SEC Big Ten matchup. So it's like they've set this up to get as many of those teams in those two conferences to play each other, to create that drama in the media. And then also, obviously the TV ratings when those two conferences play each other is going to be great. So that's what it looks to me like. And then, of course, you got Texas Tech and Oregon at 4 and 5. They'll sort that out between them. But to me, it looked like between 1, 2, 3, they tried to pair as many of those with their prior conferences. So I think it'll play out, and that will make it fun. I would love to see an Ohio State Texas A&M matchup. I think that could be a really fun matchup to watch. And if that happens, I'm like you. I still think Ohio State might be the most talented team. But if we got to see a Ohio State Texas A&M matchup, and you got the best version of Marcel Reed, that could be a really fun game. So I would like to see that. And then, a Georgia Ole Miss rematch to me would be interesting. Obviously, it would be played. It wouldn't. To me, that would be really interesting. I think just to see without Lane Kiffin on the sidelines at Ole Miss, will it be as tight this time as it was the first time? I'm going to venture to say it'll be decidedly different from that. And then, go ahead.
I'll tell you what, Ole Miss has to beat Tulane. We were talking about Tulane.
They do
be there, but this is, with Kiffin not being there on the sidelines for Ole Miss. And I know they were able to keep Weiss, which is going to be huge for them from an offensive standpoint. But I'm not totally sold that Ole Miss, walks away with this game. I don't know that this game is as easy as it is for Ole Miss as a lot of people think it's going to be. Tulane is not too far away from Ole Miss distance wise, and I think they'd love to be that first G5 team who actually did something in the playoffs. I think they're going to come prepared to play. I just wonder how Golding is going to be able to rally the troops, and that's going to be really interesting to me. In any case, I don't think Ole Miss has much of a chance against Georgia if they win.
Right. I do think it's interesting. When these two teams played the first time, we thought it would be competitive. We thought Ole Miss would win, but we thought it would be competitive, and Ole Miss was decisively better. To your point, look, Tulane's playing their best ball. They won on the road at Memphis. When Tulane got smacked in the face at Texas San Antonio, they came back, and since then they've played really good football. Went to Memphis and dominated that game and won. Dom absolutely dominated North Texas, who's a good team. And so they're playing their best football, and Summerall still coaching them. To your point, does Ole Miss use what happened with their coach leaving to fuel them, or does the distraction of that with Golding being the head coach now, who's calling the defense? I don't worry about, honestly, Ole Miss's offense as much with Weiss being back. But Ole Miss's defense has been up and down this year. Does that suffer with Golding as the head coach? It very well could, and Tulane could make it an interesting game. I don't think they'll win, but I do think they could make it interesting. And you get it close, turnovers can make a difference too. But I'm like you. I think that'll be a closer game. I think the spread on that 17.5 now. If I was going to play it, I might play that game, taking Tulane to stay within that 17.5. I don't think it'll be as decisive this time. But where I'm like you, I definitely think Georgia wins that game much more decidedly in a rematch.
Yeah.
Let's talk Miami and Notre Dame now. And so I get the whole head-to-head's got to matter. And I'm not going to say it doesn't. I do think sometimes you got to look at deeper inside head-to-head. And so, because that's been the big argument in this, is the whole head-to-head thing. And obviously, if you beat a team, that's got to count. I don't dispute that. But here's where, to me, I look at this game and I look at it a little differently. So there was the first game of the season at Miami, and C.J. Carr is a redshirt freshman playing in his first start. They get off to a rough start. He leads them back, gets the game tied. Miami kicks a field goal to win it. Look, if you're a veteran team, and Miami is, and Carson Beck was their quarterback, he's a veteran quarterback. He's been there. If you're a veteran team and it's an even matchup and you're playing on your home field in the first game of the season, you should win that game. And they did by a field goal. And to me, I take those teams, put them on a neutral field in that first game. Miami might have still won. They might not. Who knows? If I think that game is played at Notre Dame, the way that the game played out, I think Notre Dame probably gets that win with it, being a 3-point game. And I think you got to take that into consideration and look at, where did C.J. Carr come from in that first game and how he played the rest of the year. Now, you saw him visibly change that first game. He struggled that first quarter. He looked rough. But that second half, he really kicked it in. And, he learned, and his competitive, nature really came out of him, and he led that team from behind. You saw a quarterback mature right there immediately in one game. And I just think the way that they got better defensively, and you saw that visibly through the year, I think, originally this committee took that into consideration, and I personally think they're right. Look, if you play head-to-head in November, it's not a question. Whoever wins that game is the better team. But I just think head-to-head in September, when it's a 3-point game on the road, I don't know that weighs as heavily. It doesn't to me. Again, if it's a head-to-head in November, it does. But teams improve, and I think you got to look at that. And I think you got to look at, when I look at Notre Dame's, and wins have got to matter. And, where I was going is, when I look at Notre Dame's 2 losses, they lost to a good A&M team by 1 point. They lost on the road to Miami by 3 points. Their 2 losses are 4 points. Louisville beat Miami at Miami by double digits. And to me, that's a worse loss than any of this. Louisville's a good team, but again, you lose on your home field by double digits, and then Miami goes on the road, is up on SMU, game gets tied, and they just kind of lay it in overtime and lose that game. I just think those two losses, and look, it's the wins are more important. And I think the win Notre Dame had against USC was decisive. They beat them by 18, and USC is a good team. I think it's a very close argument, but I just think the timing of that matchup, first game of the season, I would have leaned Notre Dame. I'm not going to say that the argument over head to head doesn't carry weight. That would be stupid. But I just think you have to sometimes look into it differently. I know you believe in the head to head. What's your thought on the Miami one?
Yeah, first of all, I think the committee got it right. I think they screwed up all season long by flipping them because, like I said, if you felt that way, if you feel that way on December 8th, then, what changed from December 4th or December 1st or November 14th or whatever. So it's, again, as we talked about earlier, it's just the NCAA finding another way to screw things up again, as they're so good at doing. I also look at Notre Dame's, their scheduling and their refusal to get into a conference. Now, was this perhaps a little side shot, little shot across the bow to get Notre Dame to try to join a conference? I don't know. If they were in a conference, they wouldn't have to worry about this stuff, but their greed and their arrogance is outweighing the what's in their football teams or their athletic program's best interest, which would be joining a conference. Money wise, they want to keep the whole pie to themselves, but it's embarrassing to me to watch Notre Dame fans throw a tantrum and act like the college football world revolves around them when they haven't won a national championship since Reagan was in office. So if Notre Dame, they're we're gonna, we're boycotting ESPN, we're gonna do this and that, and the clock's still going to keep turning, the second hand's going to keep clicking, and nobody cares because there are tons of other teams. There have been 35 plus national champions since the last time Notre Dame won a national championship. So I think that their thoughts about their relevance in football is a little overrated now. I'm not going to say that they're not a brand and they don't drive a lot of money in college football, because they do. But to act like them being left out is going to be this big financial detriment to the NCAA, ESPN, and everybody else is just silly. It's not going to happen. Like I said, I wish they just joined a conference and then, they wouldn't have to worry about this stuff. So, or, at the end of the day, and I say this to any fan who's got an argument when their team loses games, win your games. If you lose your games, you really have nothing to, complain about, because, you can say, oh, well, they lost this game and they lost that game. You know what? Well, if you had won yours, you wouldn't be in this position. So, when you lose a game, now these guys have lost 2 games. It wasn't like they just lost 1 game; they lost twice. So when you lose 2 games, you kind of, to me, you've kind of given up your right to whine too much, because if Notre Dame wins either one of those games, we're not having this conversation because they're in the playoffs. So those are my thoughts on it.
That is 100% right. And again, you can argue it either way. I mean, there's valid arguments, I think, in both. All right, so look, that's a lot on the playoffs. Got a lot to look forward to. We'll discuss the bowl, the decision, because we had a lot of teams opt out. We'll discuss that one later. That's a good argument too. Let's any thoughts on Saturday's games and how they played out. As far as anything stood out to you from we've already kind of hit Georgia and Bama, but you might hit on it again. But just the games, and I guess you could even start, Friday with Tulane, North Texas. Anything that stood out to you in the conference championship games?
I thought North Texas had beat Tulane, so Tulane, showed up and they just outplayed and they deserved to win that game. Saturday's games, Georgia, I thought Georgia would dominate Alabama. They did. I thought Ohio State would dominate Indiana, and I was way off on that one. Indiana busted them in the mouth and did what they had to do there. Texas Tech, BYU. I thought BYU would show up and play better. I picked them to win, and it was probably more of a Utah homer pick than an actual football prognostication. However, I thought with keeping Sataki and everything, I thought that those kids had come out and play hard for them. They come out and scored on that first possession, and it looked like it was going to be a ball game, and that was it. They didn't do anything the rest of the day but get pushed around. So, heck of a game by Texas Tech, but yeah, some good stuff. Looking forward to this weekend. I would really love to see an Alabama Indiana matchup in the quarters of the playoff. I think that's that's going to be a really big game if that game happens. And Indiana, Indiana's a better team than Alabama right now, but Alabama's still a lot more talented than Indiana. And Jimmy's and Joe's. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm like you. I thought North Texas would win, and Tulane dominated that game. I give them credit. Um, Georgia, I thought Georgia would win, but the game played out differently to me than what I thought would go into the game. I was surprised at how Georgia's defense dominated Bama's offense. Bama was fortunate to score. If you take that penalty away on the drive that they scored on, Bama would have been shut out.
Yep.
209 yards of offense. I mean, Georgia's defense just absolutely dominated. It's the best game Georgia's defense had all year.
Yep.
So that part surprised me about that. And then I thought Indiana might beat Ohio State. I actually did predict that one. But look, here was the reason, and it's probably the reason that the game played out. I just thought Indiana would be the hungrier team in that game. They've not won any semblance of a championship. Ohio State has won Big Ten championships. They won a national championship last year. They were undefeated. They read the headlines. You talk about rat poison. They're the team that had the rat poison in their mind. And we're in Indiana. Their whole focus is on this is our championship. Let's go win one. And so to me, going into the game, they just had the ability to get more focused on that moment. And I think that's kind of how it played out. Look, missed field goal, short chip shot field goal, or it could have went in overtime, and Ohio State could have won it. So it's not, Indiana's, like we've talked, they really played well in the line of scrimmage, but it's not like either one of those teams dominated the other. So really good game, best game of the weekend in my opinion. And then the crazy finale that threw all this thing into a mess, that ACC championship with Duke, pulling out the win there. Man, that's just crazy. Duke jumps out ahead, and Virginia's crashing, clawed and scored a touchdown late to get back in it. Duke goes for it on 4th and 1 and gets it and scores. And then the very first play, Virginia runs a flea flicker where they throw it to the wide receiver behind the line of scrimmage, and he throws an interception. I got to think Virginia's coach would love to have that call back. I mean,
that was God.
Just crazy. You've got momentum, and your strength is running the ball, and you let that decision by your non-quarterback. You let that decision cost you the game.
Right.
I don't know what he was thinking.
I understand. I mean, they got pushed back 15 yards, so they started at the 40, but it wasn't 1st and 25. It was still 1st and 10. It was just from the 40 instead of the 25. So there wasn't a need to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and you didn't have to score on the first play of it wasn't a one play overtime. So no. I agree with you. I think that was, I think that Virginia fans that call will go down in infamy as one of the biggest bonehead calls in that program's history, just because of the time and place.
Yes,
like you said, because Virginia, they had came back and they had all the momentum, so Duke comes out and scores, and you're thinking, okay, well, I mean, Virginia marched down the field that last possession. Let's see if they can do it again, and then they got the penalty, which pushed them back to the 40. And then, they just call that play, and I was almost in disbelief. I can't imagine how I'd have felt if I was a Virginia fan. I'd have probably tossed a chunk of the TV. It was bad. But yeah, I mean, it's something that you just, you go down swinging, and you go, if it's like in basketball, and you were a manager at Oklahoma State for the basketball team, so you understand when you're at the end of the game, you want the ball in your best player's hands. Okay,
Absolutely.
making either he's going to win it for us or lose it for us. Nobody draws up that play. It was just bad, just bad.
Yeah, you absolutely. You want your playmakers to decide the game. That's 100% it. You may run that play if you, like you said, if you had a penalty and it's 3rd and 15 or something, and you're trying to pull a rabbit out of the hat. But like you said, it's just 4 first downs. That's all it changed.
Yep.
Instead of the 25, it's just get first downs.
Yep.
And again, if anything, let your 6-year quarterback make the decisions throwing the ball. That's why you're there. The running game, and you have a 6-year quarterback. I don't know. It's just crazy. But it was a fun weekend, and it led us to some, where we're at with the playoffs. It's going to be an exciting time. So, we'll let that. I'll let you. You got any more final thoughts, from the weekend, and we'll close this out.
Tomorrow night, DMAC will be back with us. He's doing a day of reverence or something with the church. There's me and Kevin, and then there's DMAC. DMAC is the Holy One, so he keeps us Georgia heathens more, a little in line. We got a little, angel, devil, one of those things. We got DMAC as the angel side, so good for him. We need that. But we're looking forward to tomorrow night. Looking forward to this weekend's games. Looking forward to the Georgia high school games as well as, college basketball starting to kick off. So we're going to start getting into that here shortly, talking about baseball as well as some baseball season previews. So a lot going on here on Southern Sports Gumbo. Looking forward to it.
Yes, indeed. Well, like, subscribe, and come back and join us tomorrow for the live. Have a great evening.
Yes.
Okay. I think it stopped.
Mine's still running.
Okay.
The clock is.
Right.
I'd tell you how to stop, but I have no clue.
Well, I can see it. That part's easy. But it's like it's showing we're trying to reconnect. But we can hear each other. I'm going to exit and come right back. And we'll see if that stops it. Hold on.
Do you want me to text DMAC and see if he knows how to make it stop? Oh, you got it.